A Tale from Pine Tree Kingdom. Once upon a time, long, long ago, at least in the minds of young children, not so very far away, a young girl named Julie was diagnosed with cancer.
Well, I can remember when we heard the diagnosis of Julie, and Jack Priest said, "You've been dealt a really bad deck of cards." And she went right into the hospital. I believe it was on a Saturday, and everything started, and it was a whirlwind. I didn't even know what leukemia was at that point.
And as parents always do, they want to do something, they feel helpless, they want to do something to fight this horrible disease, and they came up with an idea of having a mixed doubles tennis tournament. And through a mutual friend, they came to our farm and asked if we would help with seed money and direction with logistics on how to get the tournament off the ground.
We wanted to do something, so it could be cured.
It was a cold, rainy November day right after a busy apple season. I can still remember when they came. And I always give my sister Barb, the oldest out of the 6 kids that we have in our family, as the credit to saying, I really think that we should do this. She kind of presented what they wanted, and she said she had felt the magic, maybe, let's say, and so we did it.
The Pine Tree Apple Tennis Classic was born. The wizards at the castle put on their thinking caps and realized perhaps there was something that could be done. They started to work together with the community to learn more about childhood cancer.
So in the early days of Pine Tree, one of the oncologists here, Dr. Jack Priest, had a patient with a very rare lung tumor.
A 2-year-old girl from Mankato, Minnesota, walked in who had an unusual chest tumor.
I was originally diagnosed with another type of cancer when I was 2 and went through 2 years of chemotherapy.
One of the pathologists named Pepper Daner, who is a world-known pathologist, was collecting cases of this rare kind of tumor.
In 1977, Pepper had his first case that he actually thought was Wilms tumor metastatic to the lung. When the doctor told him there weren't no tumors in the kidney, it couldn't be, it had to be something else. But he didn't know what it was. A few years later, he got a second case and a third case.
And when I was in remission, a year or 2 later, my brother got sick.
Her brother came in with that same kind of chest tumor.
And people realized very early on that couldn't be a coincidence, that there had to be more going on.
The tumor is really uncommon, and to have 2 examples in the same family points to something likely being genetic predisposition.
And they took the tumors out of him, and the pathologist, Dr. Pepper Daner, had recognized the pathology from another slide, and it just happened to be mine. So he linked the 2 and named it pleural pulmonary blastoma.
Here's what we got. We've got families with this rare disease. It's a killer. We have to find a way to detect it early. We want to do a family study, and we want to find the gene.
And so early Pine Tree funds were used to try to understand the connection or the heredity of this very rare lung tumor.
Because it was so rare, and because we were the only people writing papers on it, we became effectively the world's experts on this very, very rare tumor.
The doctors always had the passion. I think that the passion started with them, and it just kind of filtered down to us. And it just inspired us.
Pine Tree has remained a truly grassroots, independent, group of people that are mostly up in the Northeast Metro that have maintained an independence and a flexibility to the funds that it raises.
This group, these great volunteers and people that spend hours and days working, were willing to fund something that sort of seemed esoteric. And so they were able to fund something that nobody was interested in, that affected lots of kids, that kids even died from it.
One of the things people also realized very early on is that this tumor wasn't just related to other cases of pleural pulmonary blastoma, but was related to a lot of different forms of cancer. And so people use that knowledge to try to understand more about what actually causes pleural pulmonary blastoma and these other related rare cancers.
And they began to piece together the different tumors and conditions that ran with PPB.
They started the registry several years ago to kind of embark on the research, and oncologists from all over the world and families from all over the world can go onto this website and connect with the research team.
A research assistant at that point named Gretchen Williams and I were the only people in the world focused on this rare disease.
Every time I see Gretchen Williams, it's so funny. She'll tell me, well, I say, Gretchen, where'd you get a phone call today? Canary Islands. She names all these far off places all over the world that we've touched.
I used to say to Gretchen, every day we will learn something new. Every day some piece of information comes into us that gives us a connection.
We pulled, I think, 75 to 100 family members, came in to the church basement that my mom had contacted, and they were able to provide blood. That 3 years later, Dr. Ashley Hill was able to, with that research team, they could find the gene.
Thinking that we were looking for a needle in a haystack, not at all sure that we'd find it.
And that is funded, and the funding is provided by the Pine Tree Apple Tennis Classic.
In 2008, magical news began to filter through the Pine Tree Kingdom. The wizards discovered a gene called Dicer1.
Well, to hear about that breakthrough with the Dicer gene gives me goosebumps.
I wasn't a geneticist, but I knew that a stop sign in the middle of a protein, probably not a good idea. We had our first mutation in Dicer.
Dicer1. It's a really critical gene. It helps humans form. It regulates how all our proteins are expressed in our body. So when that gene isn't working correctly, cancers can form.
And she says, I got the gene, okay? And she said Dicer1, and at that point Jack and I didn't really realize how important Dicer1 was. And she was sitting on the phone and she told us, you know, the first primers on the first patients and the first gene was Dicer1, and I got it. And that was an amazing feeling, like we're gonna now open a whole flood of phenomenal critical research in cancer.
At this point in the story, not everyone lives happily ever after, but progress is being made.
So now the next part of the story is that we use what we understand about this gene called Dicer1 to find kids with PPB as early as possible when their tumors are in their earliest and most curable form.
When I was 27, I gave birth to my son, and he's healthy. And then in 2011, my daughter was born, and they both have the Dicer1 gene.
So with the support of Pine Tree, we tested women with ovarian tumors for this change in the Dicer1 gene. And when we found it, we offered testing for their children. In 2014, we met a family in which we were able to pick up their son's PPB in its earliest and most curable stage, when it can be removed just with surgery alone, without the need for chemotherapy, without the need for radiation. And that's a huge advance in the treatment of these tumors that we're very excited about. That would not have happened without Pine Tree.
But because of the research and the funding from the Pine Tree Apple Tennis Classic, we were able to know that they had the gene, know what we needed to do for early screening, and we went through the screening process with Dr. Yoav, and they are healthy and still remain cancer-free.
None of it would have happened without the Pine Tree.
The reason Pine Tree's been so impactful is because they're truly putting the money in the hands of people that know.
A one-for-one connection between the physicians doing the work and the volunteers raising the money. It's really a magical combination.
It feels like we're just starting to pull on some really important threads, so that part of it is really exciting.
That if we know that Dicer1 is related to pleural pulmonary blastoma, and we know that sometimes in families with pleural pulmonary blastoma, PPB, some people have ovarian tumors. Well, gosh, we need to figure out the connection between Dicer1 and these ovarian tumors.
They've got their plan, and they know what has to be done, and we're raising the money to help them. So it's you know, a pretty good relationship. You just tell us what you need, and we'll work our butts off to go get it.
I think Pine Tree has lasted as long as it has because it's a small community but everybody that's involved is very dedicated to the cause and for what Pine Tree does.
Another really neat avenue of research we're heading down is the physical therapy. You know, we've got Dr. Laura Gilchrist and the stuff she's doing, and so we're not only treating your cancer, but we're giving you the physical therapy you need so that when you're all done and free of cancer, you can run, you can play sports. It's just
Carry your backpack.
Carry your backpack, yes.
30 years ago, it was very grim, and the unknowns were too much to handle at times because you didn't know. But now I can trust in this PPB team, and through their funding and research with Pine Tree Apple Tennis Classic, my kids are in great hands.
Childhood cancer research is not just something that happens in a lab or in a clinic. Sure, you need labs and clinics, but the beauty of Pine Tree is that it's really shown us that you need not only labs and clinics, but you also need an involved network of families and who are willing to help contribute to this research and excited to help contribute, hoping that they will help their children, as Pine Tree has shown that it can. And those labs and clinics and that network of patient families needs to be supported by a community of people, by philanthropy that can really make that research happen. So it's really a team effort, and I'm grateful to Pine Tree for their role in it.
And none of us are good quitters. We'll just keep working hard and keep making money and trying to support the cause.
But thanks to the Children's Hospital, the nurses, the docs, and now the research that's helping other children.
And thanks to the Pine Tree.
Yeah.
For 30 years. That's awesome.
Now there are times that are terrible, no good, awful, very bad days. Times when we hear of or witness ourselves the death of children that we hold dear. And those times are awful. But even within those times there's hope. Hope provided by the work we all do together. Much of that work here is supported by Pine Tree, and it is beautiful and always inspiring.
The research wizards are using information to help kids and adults with cancer in Pine Tree Kingdom and in all faraway kingdoms so that everyone can live happily ever after.